Before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a massive shout out to our amazing sponsor this season, Caroline from Huntington House Kitchen. Caroline is a multi-award winning business owner and baker and the life and soul behind her online membership, the Bake With Me Club. She helps people of all skill levels bake with confidence from the comfort of their own kitchen. She's passionate about making baking simple, fun and healthier, and her classes are hands-on, interactive and packed with tips and guidance. Right now, Caroline is sharing a fantastic free download with listeners called 5 Secrets to Make a Perfect Sponge Cake. It's full of her tried and tested simple tips so you can bake beautiful, delicious sponges every time without the stress. You can grab it at www.huntingtonhousekitchen.co.uk/5 secrets. I'll make sure to pop the link along with all the ways to find out more about Caroline and her Bake With Me Club in the show notes too. In the meantime though, let's get back to the episode that you're here for. Today, I am joined by Caroline Cookson, pricing expert and champion of helping small business owners charge properly for the value they bring. We have an honest and practical conversation about pricing, why it feels so loaded, why so many women second-guess themselves, and how to approach it with confidence instead of fear. Caroline shares her expert insights on how to set your initial prices strategically, how to know when it's time to increase them, and how to communicate price rises without over-explaining or apologising. We also talk about discounting, when it can be strategic, when it can undermine your positioning, and how to avoid making reactive pricing decisions. So if you've ever undercharged, avoided raising your prices, or felt uncomfortable talking about money, then this conversation will help you think about pricing in a clearer, calmer, and more empowered way. But before we dive in, if you are new here, hi, I am your host, Becky McAvoy. I am a multi-award-winning social media marketer and the dreamer behind Be Heard Socials and the Boss Your Socials Club. I created this podcast to help women like you simplify your life and grow a business on your terms without the overwhelm. So if you're ready for some no BS advice, practical tips and honest chats that make social media and business feel lighter and more doable, then you are in exactly the right place. Whilst you're here, can I please ask a tiny favour? If you're enjoying the show, it would mean the world if you could follow the podcast and leave a quick review. It genuinely helps more women discover the show because the more engagement it has, the more the platforms recommend it to people who need this kind of support. It only takes a small moment, but it makes such a massive difference. Thank you so much. Now let's get started with this week's episode. Hi, Caroline. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. I am so excited about today because we are going to be talking about all things pricing, which I just think is relevant to absolutely every business owner out there.
Yes, absolutely. It's important for everyone.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it's something as women especially really struggle with and find difficult. So I'm really looking forward to it. But before we get stuck into all of that stuff, do you just want to share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Caroline. I run Cookson Partners, which is a pricing and growth strategy consultancy. And where to begin? So, I've been doing this for about a year now. So it's all still, kind of fairly new, but coming up to my anniversary, which is really exciting. I spent most of my career in the corporate world, so in finance, and then working for a big spirits company for most of my career across finance, commercial roles, strategy and marketing. So getting to see a whole different mix of the business. And then last year I left and I knew that I wanted to do my own thing. Like having worked in a big corporation, I got a lot of great experience, but I knew that I wanted to do things for myself and try doing things my way and set up my own business. So that was when I decided to set up my consultancy. And then I decided to do pricing because it's a topic that I've always been really interested in. And I've done a lot of work on pricing through the years. I've looked at it from a finance, from a strategy perspective, from a commercial reality, from a marketing positioning perspective. So it was a topic where I could take that experience across all the different areas that I've worked and kind of pull it together with a good dose of psychology on top of that, which I've always been really interested in. So it's kind of taking that broad experience, pulling it together and then helping people out. And it was my chance to take that big corporate experience and help smaller businesses and values-led businesses as well with all things pricing. So yeah, that's kind of how I came about to be running my own business.
Love that. And I didn't realize you were so, I would say new into business because a year's a long time to be running a business, but I didn't realize that, it was sort of that early on in your business. And how exciting that your first anniversary is. So when is your first anniversary?
It's start of March, so kind of the next few weeks. Yeah, really soon. Yeah, I know. And it feels like I've been doing it for a long time and no time at all at the same time. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I 100% get that feeling. And for context for anyone listening, so we're recording this at the very end of February, and this will come out sort of around early to mid March. So you might have just had your first birthday. So obviously, later on in the episode and in the show notes, there'll be all Caroline's details. So go wish her a happy first business birthday. That is such a massive milestone. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You are very welcome. So I suppose, I don't know, I guess a good place to start would be, and I touched on this a little bit just now, because I do think it's something women especially struggle with around pricing. Why do you think that people, or women especially, do struggle so much with pricing and and knowing how much to charge in the first place?
Yeah. So it's, look, pricing is always a tricky topic, right? It's never easy. If we had a world of perfect information, if we knew how much people wanted to spend on our services or our products, then we'd be able to charge them the right price, but we don't. The more data you have, the better. But we live in an environment where we don't have perfect data and we don't have perfect information. So there is always a bit of art and a bit of science, I say to it, right? So the science is getting as much kind of customer information, client information as you can, understanding your competitors, understanding what the market looks like, understanding what value you bring as well. And then there's the art bit, which is kind of taking all the information that you've got, it being not perfect, and then, making a decision and taking it and learning and testing from there. I think where female business owners find it tricky, well, well, I think everyone finds it tricky when you're talking about yourself in particular, right? Because you're putting a value on what you offer. And particularly as women, we're often taught to be the good girl, right? We're taught to be the people pleasers. This is certainly something that I do. And I found doing my own pricing really difficult, right? Because you're putting yourself out there with a number attached to it. And whilst rationally you might know how much you're worth and, know that you're good at your job, you offer a great service, but actually putting a number on it and then putting it out there is just a really tricky thing to do. It's quite vulnerable in a lot of ways. And it can tap into that, kind of people pleasing. You want to give people a good deal. You want to, give them a bargain. You want to, keep them happy. But you've got to get that balance right of really charging what you're worth and getting your value that you deserve, right?
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting, because I also think as well, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, but as you were talking then, I was just thinking so many women that I've had on the podcast, when I asked them about like their story about how they became a business owner, talk about sort of it being an accident basically, and it wasn't necessarily a choice. It was because like the employed life wasn't flexible enough or whatever it might be. And I was certainly one of those people where it was like, well, what else am I going to do? Oh, well, I'll try and do this. And I wonder whether it's a mindset as well around, like, it took me a long time, I think, before I actually took myself seriously as a business, as opposed to just trying to make a bit of money. And like you were talking then about, competitors and what other people charge and whatever. And I didn't even look at any of that until sort of like, I don't know, like couple of years possibly, or at least over a year into my business. And I was just thinking about this whilst you were talking, when the first person agreed, so I was doing social media management at the time, and they agreed to pay me £50 a week, and I honestly thought I'd won the lottery. And saying to my husband, oh my God, like they said they're going to give me like 200 quid a month, like that's just, and I was so like, and that's insane now when I think about, I mean, I don't do social media management now, but when I finished doing it, what I was charging then and all that kind of stuff. But I'm genuinely thrilled, because I was like, oh my God, that's going to be, that will help us do this. And I don't think I was even thinking about, I was almost thinking about like, right, okay, what do I need to make to get us through the next few months, as opposed to what should I charge? And I think a lot of women find themselves in that situation as well, where they fall into business out of lack of choice or flexibility or whatever it might be. And don't, like, that's not even on your radar at that point. It's just like, what will you pay me? Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. You're grateful for what you can get rather than thinking, okay, what am I actually worth? What is what I'm offering actually worth? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I really love all of that. So if someone is trying to figure out what to charge in the early stage of their business, where do you think they should realistically start, and what factors do you think genuinely matter, or what are the most important things?
So the first place to start is to really understand your positioning. So understand what it is that you offer and why that's different from your competitive set, perhaps. And then kind of what level you're at. So by that, I mean, kind of what standard of service are you providing? Are you providing something that's like quick and cheap and easy? Or are you providing something that's really high end and premium and good quality, right? And that's really about understanding kind of if you're a service, it's understanding, what do you do? What's your experience? What value do you bring to your clients. So getting really clear on that is the first step, because then you can go out and then start to compare. So as much as you can, getting information about your competitors and how much they charge, that's a really good place to start. And then really being very pragmatic about where you sit versus them, and then how you adjust your price accordingly, right? So, are you more premium than them? Are you less premium? But really making sure you're anchoring yourself in with those other people. And that's obviously as long as you get that information, which can be difficult, right? Because not everyone puts their prices out there. So that can be the really hard part, in which case you just got to have a lot of conversations, right? And speak to as many people as you can, understand what the norm is in the industry, and then kind of pitch yourself in there and test and learn, right? So start with the price. I'd say always better to start slightly higher than you're comfortable with, because you can always take it down. You can always discount. You can always do an offer, but be brave in your pricing. Start somewhere and then test and learn, right? And if it's working, then that's great. If it's too high, you'll find out quite quickly and you can lower it. If people snap it up really quickly, maybe that's a sign that it's too low, right? And then there's opportunity to raise it as well. So I'd say kind of the starting point is understanding kind of where you sit and what you offer in a very pragmatic way, and then looking at bringing the price in, right? And it shouldn't ever be kind of, this is how much it costs me, right? Cost plus margin. A lot of people do that, and it's not a great way to do it. Or some people look at, okay, this is what I used to earn, and this is, how much I think it's worth. That is one way of looking at it, but actually you're much better off thinking about, okay, what is the market? What is the client? What are they willing to pay? And if there's any way that you can put a number on the value that you bring, right? So if your service is going to save them a certain amount of money, then that's another great way of looking at it as well, because that can really help anchor your price in terms of the value that you're bringing to a business too.
Yeah, and I wonder, you've got sort of any thoughts around, because you were saying as well, just to like looking at what other people charge and competitors and that kind of thing. And I suppose that can be on two ends, can't it? Because it can give you a benchmark, but also I think that can be quite difficult sometimes because, and literally this happened actually in the last couple of weeks. And obviously what am I now? Like coming up to 7 years in my business. And so I'm at quite a solid place that I'm okay. Like I know what's okay and what's kind of not. I saw a post in a Facebook group the other day where somebody was asking if there was anybody they'd created, like the post basically went along the lines of, I've created this thing using AI and I just need a graphic designer. All I need them to do is do these couple of bits on Canva. Like I've done the main bits. I wondered how much this would cost. And then they'd ask something about social media as well. Basically, long story short, the comments were full of people going, oh, I'll do that for you for like £25. And then somebody else was saying, oh, I can do social media management for like 30 quid a week. And like this was in one of the local Facebook groups. And I was like, oh my God, like it literally sent me into some kind of blind rage. And I nearly commented and I thought, no, don't, because it's a local group. And like there's no need and whatever. But also it can be quite dangerous, I think, when you're starting out and you see stuff like that out there, that it's scary as well. Have you got any thoughts on, I guess, looking at what other people are doing, but also not looking at what they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and that's where, as much as you can have a broad picture of the environment that puts it in perspective, it's really important. So, from your many years of experience, how much people should be paying for social media management, right? You know that. You've seen that in lots of different areas. So you might see that one post where people are like, oh, we're charging, £25. And yes, it's really natural that you'd be like, oh my goodness, I've done that. I've looked at things on websites and been like, that seems really cheap. But obviously they're not providing a proper service, right? And you know that, right? Because you can't do that for that amount of money. And actually what people are paying for is your experience, your expertise, the ability to make strategic decisions, all of this experience that you've built up over the years, that's all included within your price, right? So it's not just someone who is going online and posting a Facebook post. It's someone who has thought strategically about what does this look like, using all your experience that you've got throughout the years. And that's what they're paying for. They're paying for your experience and your ability to do the job really well. So you do have to kind of shut out that noise. And kind of by knowing the bigger picture and having that experience, if you do behind you, it's good. I mean, my equivalent for me is knowing what the big pricing consultancy charge, right? And they charge a lot of money. And so it's having that context in there of, okay, this is what one end of the scale looks like, this is what the other, and I know where I sit kind of, comfortably where I'm positioning myself.
Yeah, it can be a real minefield, can't it? But you touched on earlier about, people don't always put their prices out there, so ask as many people as possible. And I suppose that's where it's really great to be part of different communities and things like that, because you can go out and ask what like-minded people are charging as opposed to sort of what you're seeing on Facebook. And also, whilst you were talking, you reminded me of, it was a long time ago actually, but something, and in fact, it might have even been in the early days of my business, I saved from like a social media post where it said something along the lines of, I've got 20 years experience in X. If it takes me half an hour to do, you're not paying for the half an hour. You're paying for the 20 years of experience, because the reason I'm doing it that quickly is because, like, not because that's how long it takes, etc. And I suppose that like throws up a bit of an interesting one as well about, and I don't know if you've got any thoughts around this, I guess it's to do with service providers, but charging for your time versus your value. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
There's a balance in there, isn't there? Right. And there are pros and cons to each one. I prefer a results based payment, right? So you're paying me to do a job, you're paying me to deliver something. If you can, package it and put it out there, then I would just charge for the result, because that's what people want, right? They're paying for you every single hour that you work. They're paying for you to deliver something. So I think it's much better to say, okay, this is the value of what I'm delivering to you, and then charge for that. And then any upside or downside, right? Because it can go both ways of doing the hours, that sits with, with you, right? But then you're incentivized to do the job as well as you can in as an efficient way as possible. So I would absolutely encourage people to go down that route. I suppose the only risk is in, some roles, if there are things you need to protect yourself in that instance, right? So if there are delays, right? If there are client-led delays, then you need to know that you're protected, and you've got to look at like your payment plans and, when you're getting paid for what, and making sure that you're covered, that if there are delays, that you're not sat there waiting for ages for someone to pay you if they're not meeting kind of what was agreed up front. So you have to have caveats around it and be quite careful with it. But I think as far as you can, I would definitely encourage more of a project-based fee rather than a per hour fee.
Yeah, and I guess some of that comes with experience, doesn't it? Because I know, and obviously I've already said that I was charging very little when I started, but also when you go into business sort of for yourself, you don't know how long stuff takes, or the kind of bumps along the road that throw you off track. And a lot of that comes from experience of doing it, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. And knowing what you're like I've realized I'm an optimist with time. I'm like, yeah, I could do that in an hour. And, 5 hours later, I'm still doing it. But there's, that's a learning experience, isn't it? It's kind of understanding what you can do and being realistic about it. And you learn that over time.
Yeah, I am with you on that. I am the worst person in the world for thinking I've got more time. You were talking earlier a little bit about setting a price and sort of not, like saying, which I really like actually, going a little bit higher than what you think, because you can always do discounts or like lower your prices or whatever. Have you got any advice for anybody who wanted to do that, basically? Like I guess the pros and cons of discounting or lowering your prices, and where that is a good idea or maybe not a good idea?
Yeah, there is a real balance in discounting, right? So it is a very effective tool for bringing people in, for getting people to sign up, to deliver, right? So it should be used, but it should be used cautiously, because it can undermine your value, and it can undermine what you stand for, right? And, a pure marketer would be like, don't ever discount, right? You are worth what you're worth. And actually a lot of, the high-end designer handbags, they don't discount, do they? But the reality is, and it's going to really depend on what industry you're in, but the odds are that you will need to discount at some point, depending on what it is that you sell. So I would say, if you are going to do it sparingly. Test and learn, right? If you can do discounts which are not visible, then that's great, because you can see, how those go. You can take that and you can learn from it and then kind of expand it. If you are going to do it, make the most of it as well, right? So if you're going to put a discount out there, make sure that you are publicizing it and you're making sure it gets that maximum reach. So it is really making the impact that you want it to. So that's what I broadly say. But yeah, be careful of it. So, for example, I have started using stick-on nails. Not today, I'm wearing my proper ones, but like I've got quite into these stick-on ones. And there is a website I've been buying them from, and I first got them on discount in November. And then there was a Black Friday discount, and then there was a Christmas discount, and then there was a Boxing Day discount. And in the Boxing Day one, they were like, we only do this a few times a year. You're going to miss out. And I was like, well, am I? And then I checked again in January and they were on discount again. And then there was a Valentine's Day discount. And the thing about that is that you're losing your credibility, right? I'm never going to buy those nails off of discount. I'm never going to pay full price, because I know that even if they are off of discount next week, if I wait 3 weeks, they're going to be on discount again. So they are eroding away at their brand value by discounting all the time. And actually the question then becomes, is your price really the right price? And if you have to discount all the time, maybe you need to lower your price as well. So there is a real balance in there, and it's something that should be approached quite cautiously.
I think it's about being honest about it, isn't it? Like, don't say, you're not going to get this for like another 6 months and then it happens the next month. You just made me think about growing up, that constant, was it the DFS sofas that was constantly closing down?
Yeah.
It never actually closed down. And it is just being really honest about that, isn't it? Of like, and like you said, like if it's constantly on discount, then is it the right price, and thinking about that. Have you helped anybody, like if you realise that your price isn't the right price and you want to, or think you might need to lower it, or you're not selling stuff, whatever, do you have any advice around that? Like, is lowering the price the right thing to do? Or do you think there's other options? Like, would you have any advice for anyone thinking about that?
Yeah, so I would say, and so it depends on what you're selling and how much control you have over the end price. So if you are selling, say, something in a store, and the retailer has final control of the price, right? Lowering your price in a situation like that is very risky, because you don't know whether they're going to just pocket that extra margin or actually pass it on to your customer. So in those instances, I'd be very careful about it. Aside from that, more broadly speaking, it is something you can do. Again, I'd encourage either discounting as a test to see if that works, experimenting with certain user groups. And then you can also look at doing different tiers, right? So I'm a big believer in tiering your pricing. So you could have a basic package, mid-tier package, and a premium package. And from a psychological perspective, that always encourages people to generally go for the middle package, right? It's a good way of getting people to step up. But it also allows people to come in at that cheaper package. So if you are thinking about changing your price, then maybe offering something different rather than changing perhaps your core product, your existing products. If you can offer something less at a lower price and experiment with it that way, I think that's a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I really like that. And you're right, it's such a difficult balance to strike. I think especially when you're a small business owner doing a lot of it yourself and you're just trying to do whatever you can do. I think that's a really helpful way to look at it. So I want to move on slightly, because we're talking a lot about discounting and undercharging and all that kind of stuff too. Talk about maybe not charging enough and thinking about like increasing prices as opposed to decreasing prices. Do you have any sort of like telltale signs that people are undercharging and need to increase their price, or something that people might notice in their own businesses is like, yeah, it's time to increase my prices?
Well, I mean, the first question would be, when did you last increase your prices? Because you should be taking regular price increases, especially, I mean, goodness, the last 2 years have been a hugely inflationary environment. So people should have been taking their price probably pretty much every year, right? So that would be my first question, would be, when did you last take your price increase? And then my second question would be, have your competitors been taking price increases, right? As much as you can see that, but are you seeing price increases in other parts? Are other people doing it too? What's the environment looking like? So that would be the second question. And then, have your costs risen, right? I'm not a fan of cost-based pricing, but it is important to keep an eye on your margins and make sure that everything is still working financially for you as well. If your costs are going up, then you probably need to put your pricing up as well, right? So there's all those kind of things that mean that those are normal indicators that you should be looking at a price increase. And if anything has changed, right, in what you're offering as well, that can be another indicator that it's time to push up your price.
Yeah, I used to I still do if I have a one-to-one retainer client, but I have it in my terms of business and my contract that I review my prices every 3 months,
Yeah.
due to the fast changing nature of like what I do, and that I'm constantly upskilling myself. Now, realistically, I never changed my prices every 3 months. It was
Yeah.
probably around once a year that I did it. But I
Yeah.
think, and obviously, like I've said, to start with, I charged very little. So I'm saying that, with the years of experience of doing it, I think it's only in the last 2-3 years that I've done that. But I think that really helped me from the point I started working with someone, set the expectation that I review my prices. It's not suddenly come out of nowhere. I think when you're business to business, it's a bit different anyway, because you're working with other business owners that kind of get it. But yeah, like I said, realistically, I never change my prices every 3 months. Sometimes I didn't even do it annually, although generally I looked at it and tried to. But have you got any like thoughts or tips or anything in like when you come to increasing your prices about how to communicate it and how to manage it quite seamlessly?
Yeah. Yeah. So, step one would be to be really clear about it, right? To let people know, what you're increasing and why, what's driving it, right? And that can be something as simple as, costs have gone up, right? But making sure that you just communicate that clearly to say that, this is the reason why I'm taking the price increase. This is what it's going up to. If you can add in any extra value, right? Or at least remind people of the value that you bring. That's a great thing to do at that stage as well when you're writing that email, say, letting people know what it is that you offer, what value you bring, just kind of giving them a quick reminder of all of that so that they feel more comfortable with it. And then making sure you're keeping it kind of personalized to you and your own kind of tone of voice and everything, because it's a human to human communication. But yeah, those are the main key things. And I do believe in transparency now. I'm going to caveat that by saying if you're a butter seller, right, you don't need to email everyone who buys your butter to let them know you're putting your price up, right? Because, most of them probably don't care, right? But you do need to tell the retailer. But yeah, but if you're in a service business or you're doing anything personal, if you've got a direct communication with your customers, then absolutely communicate it and communicate it well. And don't forget to add in that justification and explain why, and then explain what you bring as well. And that's a really nice way of doing it and kind of helping people feel comfortable with it.
I was just thinking what you were saying about the like butter seller and things like that, because actually when you go into a supermarket, most of the time I don't notice that something's gone up in price unless all of a sudden my bill's extortionate. But yeah, like you said, if you're a service provider, then it becomes a little bit different in that communication. You were talking about like sort of justifying it. Do you have any tips around finding that balance between sort of justifying it and clearly explaining it, but not like over justifying yourself? Because I think, again, as women, we try to over justify ourselves a little bit sometimes. What is the balance between that and what justifies your decision? What tips into over justifying, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I would keep it actually fairly brief. So I would be clear on why it is that it's going up, but I would not go into too much detail, right? I would be quite minimalist with it if possible. Okay. So, um, due to the inflationary environment that we're experiencing at the moment, I've had to make the decision to increase my prices, right? Something like that might be enough, right? You definitely shouldn't go into 2 paragraphs worth of, this is exactly why, my rent is up and this blah, 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 right? That's not a good idea. In fact, as much as you can, because a lot of this is about building trust, right? And pricing is an area of trust with your customers, right? And it's something, it's a real, the way you approach your price can either build trust or erode trust with your customers, right? And the way that you communicate your price increases every year is another example of, where you can build trust or erode trust. And that's why I encourage people to be transparent, because if you're transparent, then you're building trust, right? You're being open. You're saying, look, this is my price increase. I am still worth it, but I am telling you about it to let you know, kind of thing. So yeah, I would explain it, but no more than a couple of sentences, I'd say, right?
I was smiling and laughing as you said that, just because I am that person that feels planning to explain everything. And then come the end of my email, I'm probably like, actually, don't worry, I won't increase my prices. I'll just give you a discount instead. It's a full circle. But that is one of the reasons that I chose to having it in my terms of business and my contracts. It came as expected. Another thing I used to do and still have is and I tweak it, but a copy and paste email for when I'm increasing my prices. Because one of the things I found really hard was actually just writing or communicating it in the first place. Whereas if I had that thing that I copied and pasted and then added in, the detail, that really helped me. Just it took the thinking away from it. It was like copy, paste, tweak and send, rather than trying to come up with the whole thing.
Yeah. That's a really good idea. And actually using AI can be quite good for that kind of thing, right? Especially because it's quite useful in terms of taking yourself out of it, right? You've got something very objective telling you whether what you're saying is good or bad, and it'll probably tell you it's good, even if it isn't good. But actually, phrasing emails, writing things, taking the emotion out of things AI can be really useful for that as well, especially if you're kind of on your own and you don't have someone else to run it past you.
Yeah. And do you know what? I was actually writing an email this morning. It wasn't about pricing, but I was on Gmail, and it had whoever their AI is basically came in with suggestions of how to change it. And I thought, I'll look through this. And I used it, and obviously it was worded better. I was like, oh my God, I sound so blunt, because obviously it does take all of the emotion out of it. And actually it did help me. Like I said, it wasn't about pricing, but it was just to someone. I was like, no, do you know what? There is a lot of fluff in there. I can take it out, but also I need to humanize it a bit more, because now I sound like I've just turned into a completely different person. But it was so helpful, like you said, just to, I think sometimes you like write it out your head, don't you? But yeah, taking that stuff out. But that copy and paste email really helps me, because it's just, like I said, I do tweak it so that it doesn't sound like I've just copied and pasted it, but it just takes that thinking bit out of it.
It does, and actually, like, and it might sound a bit ridiculous, but sometimes, like, and I have to have a chat with myself in my head about, like, what if I was doing this for someone else, right? If I was doing this for you, I'd write you the best email. I'd be like, "She's totally worth it," right? We're putting the prices up, but it's all good. And, if you were advocating for someone else, then you wouldn't hesitate to be putting the prices up, or you wouldn't hesitate to be, sending that communication. So it's much harder when you're doing it for yourself because it feels so personal. But if you can take that step back and say, okay, if I was writing this for someone else, or if I was doing this for someone else, if it wasn't for me, what would I be saying to them? And that's quite a good kind of benchmark, I think, in terms of, taking the personal out of it and just thinking, okay, if I was advocating for someone, I'd definitely be doing this.
I really love that advice. I think that works in so many different areas of life as well. Of like, I've had this conversation on a previous episode of the podcast when we were talking around boundaries, and it was like one of the best ways to set boundaries is if your best friend was telling you, or your sister or whoever was telling you that this thing had happened. What would you say to them, and what would you tell them to do? And it's like, right now, do that for yourself. So I think that works in so many different areas of your life, and it's such a simple actually, but because we as women we are very good at advocating for other people, so it is quite simple to go, and this is what I'd say, because we know what we want and need to do, but it's doing it for ourselves. So I really love that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. So if someone listening right now knows that they're undercharging, they want to increase the price, obviously, like lots of the tips and stuff that you just shared, but they're scared to change it, what's the very first thing they should go away and do you think?
So I would first step go away and put a standard price increase across all of your products, right? Anything below 5% normally is quite easy to get through. Anything above 5% gets a bit trickier, and anything above 10 is really quite hard. So you've got to kind of think about how you approach it in terms of, what your percentage increase wants to be. And it's absolutely something you can do in stages as well, right? So if, you want to do, say, a 3% increase now and then another one in 6 months' time and then another one after that, you can do that too. So that would be kind of step one, just kind of doing it across all of your products. And then step two would be thinking about what you offer as well. And, is there a way that you can bring in something more high end, or if your pricing isn't visible, maybe it's all your new customers where you put the price up by quite a bit and then you keep your old customers at the same price. So is there a way that you can kind of differentiate between different price points as well going forwards and kind of make it easier to make that step up because it's not directly comparable as well?
And do you think that works the same way for service-based businesses as well, in terms of like the size of the percentage and that kind of thing? Or would they take different things into consideration, do you think?
I think it's going to, it always depends on how price sensitive your clients are, right? And so getting a price increase through to a large business is always going to be much easier than if you're selling to a single person. I'd say it's probably fairly similar in terms of, those different thresholds, right? And if you get double digit, that's when people are like, whoa, kind of, you need some real justification there. But it's still very doable, and people do expect prices to go up every year, especially nowadays. So I know we worry about this a lot more for ourselves and for our own businesses than other people probably worry about it for us, if that makes sense. So the odds are that whoever you're selling to is probably a bit less price sensitive than you are to your own prices, right? So that's always worth bearing in mind. Yeah. Yeah.
I also think just you saying about the price sensitive thing sometimes, and I've definitely fallen into this trap, you really, there's a lot of assumptions around what people can afford and what they can't afford when you know nothing about their finances really. So you have to take all of that out of it, don't you? And just make the decision, like take the customer or the client out of it as far as is possible, and just think about the business basically in your business.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess there's ways to come back as well, isn't there? If somebody comes back and says that they can't afford it or whatever, like you said, there's always different options and routes that you can go down.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And as much as you can kind of, if your pricing isn't visible and you're bringing in new people at the higher price, but you're rewarding your existing clients, and you want to be ethical in what you're doing, right? And you want to make sure that you're being fair, but rewarding people for loyalty is a very fair thing to do, right? And keeping those prices kind of as they are. So, and bringing in new people is a good opportunity to be able to experiment with that pricing as well and say, okay, I'm going to increase this, say, by 20% because I think I really am undercharging, and then see whether those new clients are coming in. And then if they are, you're on to a good thing. And if they're not, you can always kind of bring it back down again or do an offer or something like that. So it's worth kind of, testing and experimenting with as much as you can.
Yeah, you've just reminded me as well, actually, about something else that I used to do when I had multiple retainer clients, when that was my main business. But when I was increasing my prices, it always went out to my current clients to say, just to let you know, I am increasing my prices for new clients. Your price will stay the same for the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever it was. But it would give me an idea of who was like, yeah, that's absolutely fine, and who wasn't, and whether I might need to like plan around that, basically, that I needed my prices to go up, but I wanted to reward the loyalty. But also it gave me a bit of a like safety net of going, right, okay, this person isn't going to be happy with that in 6 months' time, and I'm going to need to look to replace them and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah, really nice way of approaching it.
Thank you so much. I honestly think the timing of this episode coming out as well with the new financial year, if people work April to March, it's a really nice episode to listen to and think, yeah, actually, there are some things that I can put in place that are natural with the time of year of when prices of things generally go up and all that kind of stuff. I do have a couple of questions that I ask everybody at the end of an episode. So I'm just going to ask those before finding out where people can find you and connect with you and all that kind of stuff. The first one is, what things help you show up in your business, and what tips would you give someone else to do the same?
So what things help me show up? So God, I've got a daily planner, my little daily planner that really helps me be organized and make sure I'm like ticking things off the list and progressing what I need to, and like doing that, as I say, every day. I'm not disciplined enough to do it every day, but most days I do it. And that really helps. That helps me. Also, like, a joy of working for myself has been the flexibility, right? And being able to really figure out what works for me in terms of where's the best place that I work. And the best place that I work is in a coffee shop with a cappuccino and a piece of cake and loads of people around me. And I can just sit and focus and get my work done. And I love being able to do that, right? When I need to, I can just, take myself off and go and sit in that coffee shop. So it's kind of figuring out what the best ways of working for you, albeit, outside the norms of sitting at a desk 9 to 5, and really making sure you just kind of, listening to yourself and doing things your own way.
I love that as well when you said about, running your own business. It's so powerful when you have that reminder of you, like, I am the one that's in charge. Like, I decide what I do. Like, let's not be my own worst boss by doing it. But also what you said around ticking stuff off, there is so much joy in just like, sometimes I add stuff to my to-do list that I've done just so that I can go, yeah, I've done that.
I do that too. I'm like, oh yeah, write that down and tick. There we go.
Amazing. And then the final question was, what advice would you go back and give yourself in the early days of running your business? And I'm quite interested to hear what you say around this, because where you said you're sort of just almost a year in, like, obviously to some extent you are in the early days of your business, but actually that first year is such a huge year. Is there anything you'd go back and say to yourself like this time a year ago?
I would say, firstly, be patient, because it takes longer to build than you realize, right? Things take time, and that's okay. So I'd be like, be patient. And then I would also be like, go for it. Because I've had, I've met so many amazing people in this last year, but just by getting out there, putting myself out there, I've opened myself up to new opportunities. I've done things I never would have thought possible. And so things are just so different now than they were a year ago. So I'd be like, just go out there and give it a go and try, and you never know what's going to happen.
I really love that. And you know what? The stuff about being patient, I don't think anybody else has said that when I've asked them this question. And often people say quite similar things, but that is such an important thing to constantly remind yourself, because even like I said, my business turns 7 this year, and even now I have to be like, just slow down and be patient. Things are coming. It doesn't all have to happen at once. So yeah, I really love that.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time today. So the only final thing to ask you is, where can people find you? Where's the best place to connect with you? And is there anything else you want to share at all?
Yeah. So you're best to find me on LinkedIn, Caroline Cookson. I post on there a lot. Also, my website, cooksonpartners.com. You can find me on there. And I'm occasionally on Instagram as well, at Cookson Partners too. So yeah, come and reach out to me. I love to hear from people. Any questions or anything like that, I'd be very happy to chat. So yeah, you can find me there.
Easy. Well, I will link to all of that in the show notes so people can go and connect with you and like get straight there. And yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Cool. All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so very much for tuning in. I am honestly so grateful you choose to spend your time here. Before you go though, if you love this podcast and you're a woman running a small business who wants to make social media easier and business life less lonely, I have got something for you. The Boss Your Socials Club is here to bring you inspiration, accountability, confidence and community. It's a place where we ban the word should because we believe in bespoke advice that will work for you, your stage of life, and your business. You get a monthly content plan, ready-to-use templates, accountability and action sessions, a private members podcast, expert support, a brilliant community of women who get it, and so much more. It's like having a mini social media expert and a bunch of cheerleaders in your pocket so you can show up with confidence without the overwhelm. Membership starts at just £14 a month, and there is different tiers depending on the level of support you want. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.